Hello, welcome everyone to the AstroBit podcast, brought to you by your home for curated space news, astrobitica.com. I'm your host, Alan, the Astro Writer, and this is our next episode of Astro Wife Asks with my lovely wife, Raylene. Astro Wife, say hello.
Hi, everybody.
It's Astro Wife is going to ask me about an astrophysical, astronomical, or space-related subject she's curious about, and I do my best to explain it. It's a fun way to dive to the deep wonders of the cosmos while keeping things approachable and conversational. So, without further ado, Astro Wife, what do you want to ask this week?
I would like to ask about Pluto and why Pluto is not a planet anymore.
So, big controversy there, right? So Pluto, if most people that are listening to this remember, when we were all growing up, was the 9th planet in the solar system, right? And it's way out there. It's way past Neptune. Pluto itself is kind of small. It's smaller than our moon, actually. And let's see, the story of why Pluto is not a planet. So in the early 2000s, right, telescopes were getting really good, right? We had a lot of Earth-based telescopes. Of course, the Hubble Space Telescope was out there. And we were getting really good at observing a lot of objects in what's called the Kuiper Belt. Do you know what the Kuiper Belt is?
Isn't that the one that's way out there where Pluto is?
Yeah. So a lot of people know about the asteroid belt. That's between Mars and Jupiter. Right. The Kuiper Belt is like the asteroid belt on steroids. It's huge, right? It's actually more disc shaped. So you got to think of it like a CD, like a compact disc. But it's the disc shaped area. It's out past Neptune, and it's filled with icy bodies, right? And icy comets and some icy asteroids and things like that. And that's where Pluto is. Pluto's out there in the Kuiper Belt. And in the early 2000s, we were identifying a lot of objects out in the Kuiper Belt that were almost as big as Pluto, that were kind of in the same neighborhood as Pluto. And the big one that started this whole conversation was this body called Aries. And Aries, a lot of people, or Eris, depending on how you pronounce it, a lot of people think is actually larger than Pluto. That's still not determined exactly, but it's kind of in the same range as Pluto.
Is it out there where Pluto is as well?
Yeah, it's out there too. And it's another massive object, right? But the conversation started, does that make Aries a planet too, right? Because it's about as massive, about as large as Pluto, and it's kind of where Pluto is, and it's orbiting the sun. Does that make it a planet? And there were several other objects as well, some a little bit smaller than Pluto that are out there. And the question became, well, if Pluto's a planet, does that make all these other things a planet? And if so, then the solar system wouldn't have 9 planets. It'd have 10, 12, 20 planets, right? So there's this group called the International Astronomical Union. And that is a group of astronomers and scientists and academics from all over the world. And they're kind of like the governing body for astronomy, right? They kind of help set terms and definitions for things, and they're not like a special people. They're the professors at your universities and your researchers. It's just being part of the IAU is like their side gig, right?
So it's basically like a committee of people. This is like the thing they do for fun.
Yeah.
Like a committee they sit on.
Yeah, basically. That's what it is. So in 2006, the IAU got together, actually just a small contingent of the IAU got together and decided, well, look, if we're going to consider Aries a planet, then all these other things have to be a planet. And then they realized, hey, we haven't really defined exactly what a planet is. So they're like, let's create a definition first and see if Aries and these other bodies fit.
Wait, so we're in like the mid-2000s and we still hadn't defined what a planet is?
Yeah, so like in
crazy.
in the early 2000s, it's one of those things that like we'd never applied like a real definition to it.
It was just like we have 9 planets and leave it at that?
Yeah, it was just like, well, we know, it's kind of like, like Earth is a planet, right? That's how we had defined it. But like we didn't have like a set definition and criteria for what is a planet. And that's what the IAU set out to do. Right.
I suppose also because Pluto's so far away, there wasn't really much we could figure out about it for a while.
So, and I say a small contingent because there was about 3,000 IAU members, and only about 400 or so showed up for this meeting to come together. So that's why there's still some controversy on it, because this small contingent voted, and now we all have to follow these rules. So they came up with these 3 criteria to determine if something is a planet or not. Okay. All right. So criteria number 1, you have to orbit the sun.
Which Pluto does.
Pluto does.
It takes like 100 and something years.
Yeah, it takes forever.
Yeah.
Right. So if you orbit the sun directly, right, that is the first criteria. So Earth obviously orbits the sun, but that would exclude the moon, right?
Yeah, because the moon orbits Earth.
Exactly. The moon orbits Earth. Now it goes around the sun, but it primarily orbits the Earth in the process, right? So that excludes moons. Okay, so that was criteria number 1. You have to orbit the sun, or if you're in another solar system, you have to orbit that home star.
Okay.
All right, criteria number 2. Your mass has to be so big that gravitationally, like gravity has collapsed you into like a sphere-like shape.
Which is also Pluto, because Pluto's round.
So when you get massive enough, when you get big enough, gravity starts to work, compressing you into ball-like shapes. That's why stars and planets are all round-ish, right? Not perfectly round, not perfect spheres, but they're all round-ish because gravity pushes in on you from all different sides and like collapses you into ball. So think about like if you had a handful of Play-Doh, right? And you keep working it in your hands and pushing it in from all directions, eventually you could make a ball.
Your hands would then act as gravity.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's also why Earth is spherical and not round.
Exactly.
Okay.
So you have to be massive enough to compress into a sphere or a near sphere. So Pluto met that one.
So Pluto now meets 2 out of the 3 criteria.
2 out of the 3.
Okay.
Now that criteria excludes things like asteroids, right?
And comets and all of those
right?
things.
So because asteroids and comets a lot of times orbit the sun directly, right? So they meet criteria number 1, but they're often too small for gravity to act on them enough that they've shaped them into a sphere. So that's why they're kind of all potato shaped, as like we say. All right, criteria number 3. All right, this was the big one.
Oh my gosh.
You have to, and this is very complicated, you have to clear your orbital path of other significant celestial bodies in your way, right? That might like kick you out of your orbit or interfere with your orbit in some way, right? So you have to imagine like when a body orbits a star, right? It's like following a path. Right? Because orbits are either round or elliptical, kind of oval shaped, but they follow this kind of racetrack pattern around their star.
Yeah.
Right? You have to clear other large objects out of the way of that could interfere with your orbit to maybe knock you off course or knock you into another orbital plane or something like that. You have to clear those other large bodies out of the way.
But a thought just occurred to me. What if you are traveling at the same speed as the other things and like you just can't clear them?
Then you haven't cleared your orbital path. So Pluto doesn't meet this one, right? Because as we said, there's a lot of large icy bodies out in the Kuiper belt near Pluto's orbit, right? So it hasn't cleared that path enough. Additionally, Pluto has a moon called Charon, and Charon is just a little bit smaller than Pluto. It's not a huge difference. Like our moon is like much smaller than Earth, and Pluto and Charon are so similar in size that they actually kind of orbit the space between each other. Like Charon doesn't really orbit Pluto so much as Charon and Pluto orbit each other, kind of the empty space between each other. So there's an argument to be made that Pluto hasn't cleared Charon out of its way. There's at one point Pluto crosses Neptune's orbital path.
Oh,
right?
Gosh. Neptune would obliterate Pluto in that case.
And there's other, unnamed icy bodies out there that could, if Pluto ever came in contact with them near its orbital path, could knock it out of the solar system, could not get deeper into the solar system. So Pluto failed to meet criteria number 3, which is to clear its orbital path.
Poor Pluto.
Yeah. But consolation prize, it does get to be called a dwarf planet, though.
Oh, okay.
So a dwarf planet is something that's large enough but doesn't meet all the criteria. So like Pluto and Aries.
Isn't that kind of like an honorary planet then?
Sure. It's like the second tier of planets, right?
Like, we still love you, Pluto. You're an honorary planet.
Sure. We can go with that. Because there's several dwarf planets, right? There's Ceres, which is actually in the asteroid belt. There's Aries. There's several other out there. And we're discovering more and more, right? The more we learn about the Kuiper belt, and the more of these trans-Neptunian objects that we track and see, the list of dwarf planet grows by the day almost. So Pluto, for now, gets to be called the king of the dwarf planets until we determine the exact mass of Aries to see if Aries is more massive than Pluto.
Do you know where the name Charon came from? Because Pluto is a Roman god, right?
Yeah, I think Charon is...
Because it's spelled with a CH, not a S.
I'm not sure. I'm sure it's mythology somewhere in there.
And then Pluto has other smaller moons, Nix, Hydra, Styx, and Kerberos.
Yeah. I mean, those are going to be significantly smaller than Charon is.
Oh, right? Whoever names these things is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So is there a potential chance that when Pluto was discovered that they might have seen Charon instead of Pluto if they're orbiting each other, and then every time they looked through a telescope they were seeing one or the other until we were actually able to identify Pluto?
Possibly. I mean, we were noticing some weird perturbations in Neptune's orbit. Perturbations in astronomy or astrophysics are changes that shouldn't happen, like fluctuations, I guess. So if your orbit is not exactly smooth and maybe it shakes a little bit, or it's being influenced in some way, that's called a perturbation. And we were identifying some perturbations in Neptune's orbit to make it, why isn't it so smooth? And it's because we predicted that a body should be out past Neptune, influencing it a little bit, and that's how we found Pluto.
Okay. So the chances of Pluto ever becoming a planet are probably, are probably zero, because it'll never be able to clear Neptune if their paths do ever intersect.
Yeah. I think because of their orbital resonance, they'll never interact with each other. And if they did, like, Neptune would just swallow Pluto whole, right? Neptune is massively, massively bigger than Pluto. I mean, it wouldn't even feel it.
That'll be like millions of years, though.
But in order for it to clear everything else, I mean, who knows? I mean, over the next centuries, maybe thousands of years, Pluto might get a chance to clear everything else out of its orbit, or something else might influence those bodies and throw them out of... So there's still a chance. I think it's a pretty small one, but yeah, there's still a chance.
Because I know, myself included, a lot of people were very upset when Pluto got declassified as a planet.
Sure. Yeah, and I think it's because it was just so ingrained. Like, we all learned it early
9
on.
planets.
Yeah. Do you remember the old... what was the old sentence we used to say to remember all the planets? Because you got Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto at the time. I don't know if what they taught you in school, but I was taught, my very eager mother just served us 9 pizzas. That's how we remembered all 9. But now it doesn't make sense, right? Because now it's just, my very eager mother just served us 9. So there's no pizzas anymore.
I have to change the 9 to something else.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is why Pluto is not a planet anymore and is the dwarf planet.
Fun fact, Pluto is the Roman name for the god of the underworld.
Oh, yeah. So that's probably why it has the other moons, what was it, Styx and Nix and all those other things.
Yeah, pretty cool.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for tuning into this episode of the AstroBit Podcast. And I hope you enjoyed our conversation and maybe learned something new along the way. If you want to explore more curated space news, don't forget to check out astrobitica.com and follow us for updates on future episodes. Until next time, keep looking up and stay curious.
Bye, everybody.